Hey friendo, Steve here. Welcome back to the channel. This week we're going to do something a little bit different, and it's very sad to me because we're going to be eulogizing what once was my favorite brand in professional wrestling, NXT, because it's basically dead at this point, and WWE killed it. Why, you ask, do I say this? Well, with reports coming in from all over the place, from Fightful Select, the Wrestling Observer himself, Dave Meltzer, PW Insider, a bunch of different reports are putting together a picture of NXT that's not a very pretty one if you're a fan of the yellow and black brand. Currently, there's reports that Adam Cole has a big offer on the table for him to move to either Raw or SmackDown, which, if he doesn't take, will probably mean he'll be out of the WWE altogether. Either way, after this coming takeover, it seems like Adam Cole is going to be finally moving on from NXT off the yellow and black brand, with reports that NXT is going to be undergoing an aesthetic rebrand, a philosophical rebrand of what they do, moving away from trying to be a PWG Ring of Honor type promotion into being more of a OVW circa mid-2000s promotion, developing large special attraction wrestlers in their 20s to come over to main roster. Who knows what that's going to look like, but it's not going to look anything like what we've been seeing over the past 5, 6, 7 years. So I thought it'd be interesting to take a look back and see exactly what happened with NXT. What killed NXT? Was it AEW? Was it Vince McMahon? Was it some odd combination of all that stuff rolled up in one? Find out as we take a look at what killed NXT. But before we do that, hey, on the bright side, give this video a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Let's help grow WrestleJuice so that it like NXT doesn't end up dead and buried in the ground. I know some of you might think, hey, Steve, you're being awfully dramatic right now, but oh boy, I really loved NXT there for a while, and I know a lot of you too did. Anyways, all right. So first of all, let's take a little trip down memory lane, shall we? Let's take a look at some moments that highlighted what NXT really should have been and what it could have been. First up, Kevin Owens comes out and confronts John Cena during his United States Open Challenge. Kevin Owens holds the NXT title up high, says, "This is the thing, man." Powerbombs John Cena, stomps on the WWE United States Championship, and holds that NXT title really, really high. A lot of us back then in 2015 thought, wow, what a statement for NXT. Vince McMahon must really have high hopes for NXT. Turns out Vince McMahon actually just had really high hopes for Kevin Owens, because we all know Vince McMahon really loves Kevin Owens. He let the dude headbutt him really hard once. Next, Finn Balor getting called up. The Raw brand draft 2016 episode thing, where he beat Roman Reigns clean and then beat Seth frickin' Rollins at SummerSlam to win the very first Universal Championship match. That was a big, big moment. Everybody really looked at NXT like, wow, this is a place where they call up these stars who are already made, and they like actually respect what had happened in their stories before and what they had done. And NXT is this really cool place where those guys can hang with the main roster guys and they could be big superstars. And then that didn't happen. Fast forward, another great moment for NXT, Halftime Heat 2019 or 8, I think it was 2019 Halftime Heat, where we had the top stars of NXT at the time, guys like Aleister Black, Velveteen Dream, Adam Cole, Tommaso Ciampa, I think, was in there. And the WWE relied on them to hold it down during the first Halftime Heat in 20 some odd years. Might have been 20 years, 19 years, because 2000, I think they did the Stone Cold interview. Anyways, that was a pretty big moment. It's a very buzzworthy moment. And then, of course, it all kind of culminated with Survivor Series 2019 in November of 2019 as kind of a promotional tactic, it turns out, for NXT being on USA. WWE, Vince McMahon, actually lifted up NXT, had them invade SmackDown, the main roster, and had them hold their own. At that pay-per-view Survivor Series, NXT virtually swept the competition. They came out on top, and it was a huge moment. Finally, WWE, Vince McMahon was really recognizing NXT as one of the big players under the umbrella, as on par with SmackDown and Raw. And then once they headed to USA, it was clear that once AEW was too much competition for NXT to survive the Wednesday Night Wars, Vince McMahon soured on NXT pretty quickly, and we're at where we're at today because of it. So let's take a look at where NXT did well to find out what they could have done different in order to run a more competitive battle against AEW. Survivor Series 2019. What did we see there? We saw crossover with the main roster. We saw NXT be treated like it was a proper third brand, not just a developmental minor league system for WWE. You take a look at the coronation of Keith Lee to boost ratings. Keith Lee was plucked out of NXT 6 weeks later. If they were able to hold on to a core number of stars, top stars, if you're going to put a title on somebody, for example, make sure you've got clearance to keep that title on them for at least a year if you want to do that. Keith Lee was taken away from his dual title reign 6 weeks after he won that dual title thing. That killed NXT in the end, or it was one of the last nails in the coffin anyways. When you had Rhea Ripley competing with Charlotte Flair for the NXT title, that led people to tune in to NXT. They wanted to see the youth take down the establishment character of Charlotte Flair. Instead, they had the establishment character win, walk around NXT like she's better than everybody else, and I think that was a big turnoff to people. Halloween Havoc was just a really fun show with a lot of great stories. So let's take a look at all that stuff and let's make some suggestions. What WWE could have done to keep NXT competitive, to keep them going, to maybe win a little bit more against AEW. Well, number one, they would have had to pull more main roster names like Seth Rollins, Kevin Owens, Sami Zayn, three guys who have strong ties to earlier in NXT's history. Daniel Bryan, who wouldn't want to see him at a takeover. Daniel Bryan versus Johnny Gargano versus Tommaso Ciampa versus Adam Cole. That's all stuff fans would have loved to have seen. You also keep the names that sort of elevated NXT to that next level. Aleister Black, Keith Lee, Matt Riddle, maybe Andrade, Cole, Ciampa, Gargano. You keep all those guys in NXT. You build around them. You keep building their women's roster. Up until very recently, NXT was able to completely truthfully claim that they had the best women's roster on the planet. At this point, that women's roster has been a bit gutted with losing names like Toni Storm, Tegan Nox, Shotzi Blackheart to the main roster. If they had continued to build that women's roster, that's a draw. That's people are going to tune in for that, especially with that being one of the weaker aspects of AEW. Another thing NXT probably could have done if they wanted a stronger just sort of energy to their shows was to go out on tour. If I remember correctly, the original plan for AEW is to run in venues that had capacities of like 3,000 to 5,000 people. That would have been perfect for NXT, even like a 1,000 to 2,000 capacity venue for NXT. If you have a really, really, really hot crowd, that translates when you're watching on TV. You watch AEW now, hell, you even watch WWE right now. There is just something different about having a fresh crowd every single week. With all due respect to the people who are at Full Sail in the Capitol Wrestling Center, I appreciate that having a home crowd has its benefits, but it's not the same as having a hungry crowd who doesn't get to see the product live very often. That's why I think NXT did a really big disservice to themselves by staying in the same venue for such a long period of time. It felt like a smaller show. Even if you have 2,000 people in the venue, if those 2,000 people are bringing a really, really strong energy to a good product, it's going to make for a much better presentation on TV. It could see a boost in your ratings if it seems like an exciting product. Now, clearly, once COVID became a thing, NXT couldn't tour anymore. They were stuck at the Capitol Wrestling Center. AEW stuck at Daly's Place, and we got Thunderdome. But prior to the pandemic, from October of 2019 to March of 2020, NXT had no plans on touring. They didn't. They were just there at Full Sail in front of that same crowd week after week after week. So they never had plans to tour, which brings up a good question. Did COVID help kill NXT? I kind of feel like the inverse is true. AEW had a lot of plans pre-pandemic that they had to dial back because of the pandemic. They were planning on debuting Brody Lee in Rochester, New York for a big show. They were planning on Blood and Guts. They had numerous plans in place that they kind of had to put on hold for a bit because of the pandemic. We don't know. Maybe NXT would have been buried sooner because AEW would have been able to grow faster. There's no way to tell, and we'll never know. The biggest problem, though, honestly, is Vince's booking philosophy and NXT's booking philosophy, really Triple H's booking philosophy, are not compatible. Vince is a guy who likes big attractions and big moments, whereas Triple H likes to build to those moments using detailed story beats. You can take a look at Ciampa versus Gargano as probably his crowning achievement. That doesn't work when you're trying to meld these two things. I'll take a look at another example here outside of the world of wrestling, and I'm going to talk about the Netflix Marvel shows and the proper MCU. If you remember early on in the days of those Netflix Marvel shows like Daredevil, Jessica Jones, the Iron Man, Power Fist guys, and the Defenders, those were meant to be they were meant to be canon within the MCU. And then down the line, when the higher ups in Marvel realized, hey, man, we're talking about billion-dollar franchises, billion-dollar movies, and these are just TV shows. We can't concern ourselves with that stuff. And so eventually Kevin Feige, the head of the MCU, the film division, pulled the power play and said, yeah, you guys aren't really related to our MCU anymore, so that doesn't really matter anymore. And then those Netflix series eventually all got canceled. So that's kind of how I feel in some way is how NXT related to the WWE main roster. When it was convenient for WWE, NXT was treated on par with main roster. But most of the time, it simply wasn't convenient for Vince McMahon to consider NXT a true third brand. So he didn't treat it as such. He viewed it as the place where, they would build up stars to work the WWE style, and then he would take them and he would do whatever he wanted with them. He would change their costumes, their names, their appearance, their music, their gimmicks, their personalities. He would basically consider them to a degree a clean slate. People like continuity. That's why people like the Marvel stuff, because there's continuity between all the different movie franchises. So the one moment, though, that really stands out, that we really should have seen the writing on the wall, was February 18th, 2019, when Vince asked Triple H to give me your 4 best guys. And he plucked Aleister Black, Ricochet, Tommaso Ciampa, and Gargano, and he put them each in tag teams. Ciampa and Gargano ended up in a tag team, and they were in the middle of a blood feud during that period of time. Aleister Black and Ricochet had been in a Thrown Together tag team for the Dusty Classic. They were stuck in a tag team. The other two ended up going back down to NXT. Aleister Black and Ricochet had a match at that TakeOver and then went over to WrestleMania as a tag team, and we all know what happened after that. Ricochet has had some sort of success, and now Malachi Black is over on AEW programming. But the way these guys were debuted was simply, hey, we need to boost ratings really quick. Triple H, give us a slideshow presentation in the middle of the ring showing off who you got coming to town. And that was an unprecedented, incredible waste of potential call-ups for 4 guys who should have been big stars. You can maybe question whether or not the main roster is a suitable place for Johnny Gargano and Tommaso Ciampa. I think it is, but I understand why maybe Vince McMahon wouldn't. Aleister Black should have been debuting facing off against a guy like Brock Lesnar or Roman Reigns or somebody big like that. That dude has got all the money-making potential, and they completely and totally botched it with that one moment. It was awful. So that really should have told us back in February of 2019 how Vince really views NXT, and that he really didn't respect Triple H's vision for what he was trying to do and the kind of stars he was trying to develop to eventually go up to main roster. You can also look at FTR's almost complete run on main roster to say, okay, well, he's not really into this stuff. To be honest with you, NXT was meant to be, it was originally conceived of as WWE's answer to Ring of Honor and PWG. At a time, they were the two biggest sort of indie promotions. I know Ring of Honor is not an indie promotion, but it looks, feels, and acts like an indie promotion. And PWG is an independent promotion that is known across the nation as the incubator for talent for bigger companies. The thing is, once AEW came around, they understood how to combine WWE's main roster feel with the PWG, Ring of Honor, New Japan thing, all in one seamless brand. You've got everything all in one company, in one brand with one roster, and the booking philosophy melds it all so perfectly. You may not like AEW. I actually love AEW. I think it's great, especially now they're signing all the people that I really love. But you can't deny that they've been very, very successful doing what they're doing. No company has achieved that level of success in such a small amount of time doing what they're doing. They have melded NXT and WWE's main roster perfectly. They've just done it for their own company. And that's why NXT really died, because Vince McMahon never understood how to meld NXT with his main roster, because he never had an interest in it, because he doesn't believe it would make him any money. And that's the bottom line. So what can we expect from NXT? That's what I'm going to talk about in my next video here on WrestleJuice. What will NXT look like a year from now if reports that are coming out now are in fact true? So stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, check out these other videos here at WrestleJuice. If you like this video, like I said, give me a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. And let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. What killed NXT? Is NXT dead? Am I sort of jumping the gun on this too much? I don't think I am, to be honest with you, but you never know. Anyways, thanks for watching. Thanks on all of them.